Tja, jag tänkte reagera på true crime stories som någon annan har lagt ut. Och som du hör, jag är förkyld, ont i huvudet, så är inte energin på topp, så vet du varför, okej? Och vi ser här vad detta är.
Aurora Massacre. On July 20th, 2012, about a half hour into the midnight premiere of The Dark Knight Rises at the Century 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, a man dressed in tactical clothing rose from the front row, set off tear gas grenades, and fired 76 shots into the audience using numerous assault weapons. Of the 400 people inside the theater, 12 were killed and 70 were injured. 58 of them by gunfire.
Ja, det är ju fruktansvärt hemskt att man först kastade in tårgas och hade sån mask på huvudet och sköt sen med sitt vapen där inne. Ja, det är hemskt.
And 12 others in the scramble to escape. Police rushed to the scene and within minutes arrested the assailant, who was wearing a load-bearing vest, a gas mask, a ballistic helmet, and bullet-resistant leggings. Beneath all the gear, the shooter's hair was dyed bright red and
han såg ändå lite rolig ut. Jätterött hår och ser ut som det är nudlar han har på huvudet ungefär. Så jag förstår lite varför han gjorde det när man ändå ser ut som ett nudelpaket.
Beneath all the gear, the shooter's hair was dyed bright red and he reportedly referred to himself as the Joker.
Ofta.
His real name is James Holmes, and his calm and disconnected demeanor during his arrest just added to the bizarre aspects of his crime. Police found his apartment booby-trapped with explosive devices, including 30 homemade hand grenades wired to a control box in the kitchen. In 2015...
Men tänkte han då, när polisen skulle komma dit, var det meningen att polisen skulle sprängas när de kom till hans lägenhet skulle undersökas då, eller kommentera gärna vad du tror.
Prosecutors turned down Holmes' offer to plead guilty in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was found guilty of 24 counts of first-degree murder, 140 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 1 count of possessing illegal explosives. His family pleaded for him to be spared from the death penalty, claiming that Holmes is severely mentally ill.
Men skyller man ju på
Jurors
varje
failed to
gång.
reach a unanimous decision regarding the death penalty, resulting in 12 life sentences without parole for Holmes. In 2018, William H. Reed, one of the court-appointed psychiatrists who spoke with Holmes at length about his crimes, wrote a book about his experience interacting with the criminal called A Dark Night in Aurora, Inside James Holmes and the Colorado Theater Shootings. In an interview with the Associated Press, he admitted that the book's conclusion about the inner workings of the murderer's mind might disappoint readers, stating the answer, and this really is the answer, but it's not very satisfying, lies in an unimaginably detailed and complex confluence that we just can't replicate, because we can't see all of it. A big part of it is, it's hidden in Holmes's mind.
Ja, om man ska skriva en bok, varför ska den vara så komplicerad bara man kan göra? Kunde man inte skrivit den, ja, så vilken människa som helst kunde förstå den, liksom, jättekonstigt.
Number 7. Identity fraud from beyond the grave. In February 1992, a patient who called himself Thomas Hughes had a heart attack and passed away at Danbury Hospital in Connecticut. Hospital staff soon discovered that all the identifying information the man gave them was false, leading them and detectives around the country on a seemingly endless search to determine his real identity. Weeks before his death, the patient had checked into an Allentown, Pennsylvania hospital as Thomas White. He was later connected to hospitals in Rhode Island, California, and elsewhere, where he provided various names and stories, including that he was a Persian Gulf hero and one of the world's 40 stained glass artisans who were trained at the Vatican, the Morning Call reported. In addition to using false names, the mysterious patient gave fake social security numbers, addresses, and employers. He stayed at each hospital for several days before sneaking out in the middle of the night, knowing the bill would never reach him. Before he died, the man made several phone calls to attorneys with apparent plans to sue for injuries. No family members immediately came forward to identify the man, who mental health experts theorized might have been homeless, perhaps checking into hospitals using fake identities to get free shelter and meals. They also entertained the possibility that he had a mental illness that caused him to constantly seek medical care for real or imagined ailments. When the case aired on Unsolved Mysteries in 1993, viewers recognized the patient as Thomas Patrick White. It's believed that he suffered from Munchausen syndrome, a condition that causes a healthy person to constantly seek medical treatments.
Vad är det heter på svenska? När man inbillar sig att man alltid är sjuk. Är det inte någonting på hybris? Nej, hybris kan det inte vara. Kommer du på vilket ord det är på svenska så kommentera gärna. Ja, men det är ändå ganska smart utav han att göra på detta viset.
Luna Park Ghost Train Fire. One night in June 1979, the ghost train roller coaster at the Luna Park amusement park in New South Wales, Australia, erupted into flames, killing 6 young boys and 1 father. Officials ultimately classified the fire as accidental despite numerous eyewitness accounts from park visitors who overheard a suspicious leather and denim-clad group of teenage boys talking about using kerosene and matches at around the same time smoke began pouring from the ride.
Jag fattar inte det. Hur kan man tända eld på en karusell och så hann de dö i karusellen? Var det inte den bara stannat och de brukar ha sådana trappor och sånt man kan gå ner för? Jag tycker det lät väldigt konstigt.
One bystander, Les Dowd, immediately went to the police and gave a statement, which he claimed in a recent ABC interview that he was pressured to recant. Speaking publicly for the first time since the incident nearly 42 years ago, he said, "I heard one of them say, I spread the kerosene out, and I lit it with a match. Another one said, you're a fool for doing it." They started running towards the exit. Another park visitor named Tina Shakeshaft claims that the police pressured her to deviate from her statement, which was very similar to Dowd's. She refused and they eventually relented, but Shakeshaft was never summoned to testify at a judicial inquiry and was among 26 witnesses described as taking the inquiry no further. A search for the criminals was abruptly called off the following evening. The news broadcast claimed that the police found no suspicious circumstances, even though by then they had received eyewitness accounts of the adolescents and their discussion about using an accelerant to light the ghost train on fire. Even the park superintendent, Alan Chappell, had told of reprimanding a group of youths matching the description of the suspects earlier that evening. And the ride's operator recalled seeing them enter the queue minutes before the fire broke out. But these stories have allegedly fallen on deaf ears, and the suspects were never found after barely being searched for. The disturbing of...
Det är ändå ganska illa att man inte hittade personen om ändå några verkade veta vem det var som hade gjort det.
The disappearance of Margie Jelovsik. Margie Jelovsik was a young widow managing a tavern in Gary, Indiana, when she met a high-ranking motorcycle gang member named Randy Mad Yeager in 1996. The two hit it off, and unbeknownst to Maggie at first, Yeager had an extensive criminal record. Furthermore, he and several other members of the outlaw Chicago gang were under federal investigation for a laundry list of additional crimes, including racketeering, drug dealing, and murder. Margie's behavior changed in concerning ways as her relationship with Yeager progressed.
Ja, men det är inte så konstigt. Om man umgås med kriminella så blir du ju själv kriminell. Det är ju som sagt, du blir vad du äter. Och du blir vad du umgås. Eller du blir precis som de du umgås med. Och så är det ju alltid. Så tänk på vilka du umgås med. Det är väldigt viktigt.
She distanced herself from family, and when Yeager and 17 other suspects were indicted for their crimes, she became even more devoted to him. Instead of fleeing from the obvious red flags right in front of her, Margie stood by her man, even after he went on the run from the law. She became paranoid that she was under surveillance, constantly feared that the authorities would catch up to Yeager. Several months later, Margie vanished, leaving behind her car, luggage, personal effects, and the inhaler that she relied on for treating her asthma. The woman's family suspected that Yeager had kidnapped Margie, but law enforcement was not so quick to assume that her disappearance was voluntary. The U.S. Marshals Service finally caught up with the pair in 2014 after tracking them down in Mexico, where they had apparently been living for 17 years. Yeager
ändå lyckats hålla sig på flykten i över 17 år. Det är inte illa kan jag tycka. Men ja, de flesta brukar ju alltid åka fast. Det är väldigt sällan man har någon som klarar sig. Det är väl de typ från Alcatraz som klarade sig bara. Ja, några till.
Was taken into custody, but Maggie unfortunately died after leading authorities on a high-speed chase and crashing the vehicle she was driving.
Nej, vad
Number
tråkigt.
4, a clever con man. Psychological manipulation is arguably one of the most overlooked but dangerous weapons criminals sometimes use to pull off their dirty deeds. This was certainly the case when a con man named Terry Tilley was convinced of swindling 3 generations of a wealthy aristocratic French family out of their $5 million fortune. Starting as far back as the 1990s, Tilley convinced 11 members of the de Vadrines family that they were targets of a sinister Masonic plot. that only he could save them from with his alleged high-ranking connections as a secret agent and a descendant of Austro-Hungarian nobility. After programming his victims with collective paranoia, Tilly helped himself to their money, properties, jewels, and artwork. To this day, nobody knows what became of the money or valuables. And the brainwashed victims became increasingly withdrawn over time, eventually barricading themselves inside their ancestral home, which French authorities seized in 2007.
Just den historien påminner om någon historia jag pratat om, fast det var en kvinna som, vad var det, hon låtsades vara advokat för att lura till sig folk deras hus, pengar och tillgång till deras bankkort och tog deras pengar. Och det var ju med från rika människor, vad jag minns i alla fall, jag är osäker.
After they stopped paying their taxes. From there, the group went from one suburban home to another, living in anonymity and remaining sequestered from the outside world. Fearing for their lives, they eventually relocated to the UK at Tilly's urging. At one point, when a family member doubted Tilly's authenticity, he was accused of being involved in a network of evil and subsequently banished. Tilly also turned the group against another relative, Christine, whom he beat, humiliated, and threatened in an attempt to acquire a key he believed she had to a secret family fortune, which didn't actually exist. Christine fled back to France in 2009 and reported the bizarre events to authorities. Tilly was arrested, but it took the rest of the family several months of deprogramming with the help of a cult expert to realize the gravity of the man's actions against them. From there, they focused on rebuilding their lives from scratch and regaining some semblance of normalcy while Tilly was shipped off to prison to serve a 10-year well-deserved sentence for his crimes.
Ändå sjukt hur mycket man kan manipulera människor och lura människor. Att man vet inte, har jag rätt eller har jag fel, eller kanske denna personen har helt rätt om vad jag ska tycka och känna och sådana saker. Att man kan vara så bra på att manipulera andra. Det är ändå väldigt sjukt ändå. Jag vet ju själv hur det är och jag förstår andra, men det är ändå sjukt att det funkar.
Number 3. Forgotten identity following strange disappearance. Imagine waking up on a roadside in an unfamiliar place and having no idea where you are. That's what happened to a man named Pierre in 1992, when he woke up in a California ditch and couldn't think of anyone to call for help from a payphone. All he had with him was a blue duffel bag, and the only clue to his possible identity was a Boston library card for someone named Pierre April. The man's only memories were of San Diego, located 400 miles north of where he regained consciousness. And his recollection was foggy at best. With just $17 in his pocket,
Innan vi fortsätter, vad tror du har hänt med den här mannen? Jag tror han har blivit neddrogad, eller så har han kanske, jag vet inte, fått minnesförlust. Någonting har ju hänt honom, men jag vet inte vad. Kommentera gärna vad du tror, så ser vi om så kan vi se om antingen du eller jag har rätt i slutet.
Confused wanderer hitchhiked to San Diego, hoping to regain his memory. But when he got there, he did not recognize his surroundings. A bus driver took him to a homeless shelter, and exhaustive tests led experts to believe his amnesia was genuine and trauma-induced, although they admitted it's highly unusual for someone to suffer from the condition as long as Pierre had. Bits and pieces of his memory returned over time, including visions of a woman named Carol, who he believed was a former co-worker, but composite drawings initially failed to yield any fruitful connections. Finally, upon seeing the case on Unsolved Mysteries, a former co-worker named Carol called the show's telecenter and identified the man as a Canadian citizen named Pierre April, as his library card had indicated. Pierre's family said that he was missing for at least 5 months before they learned of his whereabouts. Thankfully, after reuniting with his loved ones, and looking at photos and other things from the past, Pierre's memory returned. But the details surrounding his disappearance remain largely unknown to this day. So what do you think happened to Pierre?
Inte en aning. Jag skulle väl gissa på att han fick, vad heter det, amnesia, vad heter det på svenska? Minnesförlust. Att, han fick någon blackout eller någonting, eller kanske tog några tabletter eller någonting och tappade medvetandet, fick psykos eller någonting och sen åkte iväg. Jag vet inte. Vad tror du hände? Kommentera. Jag ser att min kamera håller på att dö just nu, så jag kan inte se det sista klippet. Men tycker du om att jag kollar på sådana här videos när andra pratar, när jag reagerar på det? Visst, idag var jag ganska seg, hade väl inte så mycket att säga. Jag vet inte, det känns som det i alla fall. Jag har inte samma energi. Men Tycker du om detta så ge gärna en tumme upp. Och förresten så finns det en ny fängelsevideo på Void som inte kom till YouTube. Ja, du såg själv den blev röd. Så vill du in där och titta på den så får du gärna göra det också. För det så gött, sköt om dig, tja!